Okay, guys, what's up? This is Sebastian Castillo here. Today, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to talk about my years living in China and visiting other countries in Asia. Why? Well, that's because this was a pivotal chapter in my life so far, and every time I would like to speak about it with friends or people who are curious, I can never really do it justice because I don't have all the images on hand and I don't have the time. It's very difficult to compress years and years of experiences into a short little conversation, right? People ask me, "Oh, so how is it living in China?" Blah blah blah. I would like to talk their ear off, honestly. But then I figured, you know what? On YouTube, there are plenty of people who are curious about what it's like to live in China, and they're curious about, um, studying abroad, learning Chinese, and I figure I would just show you all a different perspective because this is not a common thing to do, right? It's very, very uncommon um, for foreigners to just go to China. Although, judging by the first picture, as you can see, there are a lot of foreigners going there. Well, there were. After 2020, I'm sure that that number will not be as high as before for a little while. But I just figured I I myself am also curious about how other people have uh, conducted themselves in places like China, South Korea, Japan, or whatever, and the the viewpoints that they want to share. And so I figured, why not share my own, right? I feel like I have a very unique perspective because not only most of these people who are sharing their stories are English teachers, right, or have taught English in some capacity. And yes, I did that too, but the original reason why I went to China was to master the Mandarin language. And I haven't done that, but I am pretty good at it. You know, not to toot my own horn, but I am pretty good at it. And so without further ado, let's just get right into it. As you can see in this first picture, this was a tug of war. I've got my Mexican brothers right behind me. Um, and The school that I was attending uh, had like an international sports day every single year, and anyone who wanted to participate could take part in a bunch of sports related activities, right? So I really enjoyed something like that, right? It was a great opportunity to meet new people, make some new friends, and it's it was fun. I guess right before we get started, another reason why I really want to share this is because this was such a special time in my life when I really didn't have a care in the world, right? I went to Shanghai specifically on a scholarship. Okay, I had the entire year paid for. The tuition was paid, uh, the dorm was paid for, and I even received a little bit of spending money every month, which looking back really wasn't much. But at that time, making money was like the furthest thing from my mind. I really just wanted to go and enjoy my life and be a kid and have fun. And it just, yeah, things are different now. But we'll get into that later. That's also a major topic I'd like to touch up on. So let's look at the next one. If I can figure out. There we go. Okay. So that's a statue of Mao Zedong, the uh, revolutionary leader of the Communist Party of China. And you'll find that in pretty much every Chinese university, there is a statue of him in like the middle. And I figured I'd just take a picture of that. Actually, looking back, I really should have taken more pictures and more videos. That's probably one of my biggest regrets of all the time that I spent there, that I just didn't record and document more of my time there, because there's so much to tell and so many experiences that I had that I have no tangible proof of anymore. They just exist up here and in the minds of whoever else experience them with me. But anyways, this was typically what I'd get at the cafeteria, although they called it the canteen. And it was okay for a while. Like a meal like this would probably be about $3, I think, maybe four or more. And initially, right, I didn't know any better. I was a 19-year-old kid. I just had to fill my stomach with something. Now at 26, I'm so much more aware of what I put in my body and the importance of proper nutrition. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not living in China anymore. Although, strangely enough, I do want to go back at some point, but this time it'll be with a much better idea of what I'm putting in my body. Anyways, this is again during the first couple of weeks. I went out to what's called the Bund, which is obviously where you see that iconic skyline. In the back there, you see the see my mouse here, this circular structure here. That's called the Oriental Pearl Tower, or in Chinese, I think it was called the Dongfang Mingzhuo. And that area of Shanghai is called Pudong. It's um, it's kind of deceiving because yes, in these pictures you see, excuse me, these incredible structures, but once you go past them, it's kind of a swamp. It's not very developed. Anyways, that was me with a Korean friend of mine. We were just clowning around there, having fun. Um, this was on a field trip that I took with my very first class, that very first semester. We went to, I think it was Nanjing actually. And so you can see I'm like right over here. That was my teacher, this woman to the left of me. She was cool. She was really chill. And she spoke decent English because she was working with students who are kind of in the lower grade levels, right? Because we're just beginners. So they're not going to speak complete Chinese since we really just can't understand enough, right? Um, Next. Again, this was the sports day thing. Each of us received, I think, shampoo or some kind of body wash product. And I mean, it was just fun and games. We weren't competing for that. We were just having fun, right? This was on the field trip again, me lighting some incense. This was a friend of mine from Holland, although I think he lived in England full time. Uh, we were going to the gym pretty often during the first couple of months until we kind of went our separate ways, but he was a good guy. This was another Korean friend of mine. Um, Not much to say there. I met a lot of really interesting people, a lot of cool people, but just usually these relationships were just temporary, right? Because at the back of everyone's mind, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to see this person for that long because we're eventually going to go back to our own countries," right? Although I ended up staying in China for nearly 5 years. This was on the field trip again. Um, as you can see, there's a really diverse group here, right? Like from the left, I remember this guy, South Korean. I don't remember where she was from. She was Russian. I think she was French. I think she was Mexican. My teacher, Mexican, French, Korean, Japanese, Austrian, like Chinese, Austrian-born Chinese guy. Don't remember where she was from. Don't remember where she is from. And then if you haven't figured it out by now, I definitely liked having the attention on me. And so that was another thing that made this time in my life so different from what I'm living now. It's that I really just felt invincible. I felt like I was on the right track. I was doing everything correctly. And that just gave me an insane level of supreme confidence in everything I did. And it showed. People picked up on it. And I feel like it was a good thing because I brought a lot of positivity to wherever I went. Now, this was on a trip to Thailand that I took in January of 2015, I believe. And this guy, he was from Turkmenistan. At the time, he really didn't speak very good English. We kind of communicated with a mixture of like English and Chinese, but it was definitely worth the trip. I loved it. Um, this was his classmate. She's a Thai girl, and she came from a pretty wealthy family. So it was incredibly fortunate of me to first meet my friend from Turkmenistan and then through him meet her because her family, God bless them, they took care of us for about, uh, I think we were there for nearly 2 weeks. They paid for almost everything, right? And we hadn't even met before this. But she's a great girl, and I still keep in contact with her to this day. And next time I go to Thailand, whenever that will be, hopefully in the next year or two, I'm definitely going to meet with her again because she was just a real sweetheart. What can I say? And the back here, I'm at the Royal Palace in Bangkok. And if you don't know, Thailand is technically a kingdom, and so they have a king, right? This was one of his residences, I believe. This was on a movie set, actually, or just a set. Maybe it was for a TV show. But if you ever go to China, you'll probably get invited to work as an extra or even get a starring role in some kind of film production because uh, they pay a premium for foreigners, and especially if you're good looking, especially if you've got some kind of unique touch to you, right? Like if they're looking for something very specific, like if you're a black guy, for example, and you kind of got the thug look, and then if they're making a production that requires that, you could make a lot of money just by being there and being noticed by them. So in this case, I was invited by a couple of Russian friends of mine, and that's another thing you might find that the Russians, the Ukrainians, a lot of Eastern Europeans tend to gravitate towards this field over there because they have the white skin and the blonde hair and blue eyes, but they're willing to accept less pay. In generally speaking, not saying every single one of them, but they're willing to accept less pay in China because that money will still go much further if they send it back to Russia, Ukraine, or wherever they came from, right? Whereas a Westerner different will typically demand, you know, at least I don't know, $100 for a day of work, um, something like that, right? Similar to Western wages, right? But anyways, this was fun. I didn't have any dialogue in this role. I think I had to pretend to be a criminal or something. I don't know. I don't even remember. This was me out at a club. I did a lot of clubbing. I did a lot of drinking. Um, Not quite as much as everyone else because I knew that I didn't want to fuck myself up permanently from all the alcohol, but I definitely had my fun. Um, I'm over on the right here, and a lot of I would party with pretty much everyone, right? I didn't really care. In this group in particular, they're almost all Russian speakers except for like these two Koreans back here, but Russian, half Chinese. In Turkmenistan, I believe they speak Russian. I think she spoke Russian. This guy's definitely Russian. This guy, like, I think his name was Vlad, but it wasn't. Like, I called him Vlad. No, I called him like Vladimir. He's like Vlad. My name is not Vladimir, but I would just keep calling him that, and because I was a dumbass, I didn't know. I knew, but I didn't want to respect him for some reason. Anyways, this was, geez, This was an evening with two of my classmates. Here we have this guy was from Toronto, so we had a really good friendship going during the year and a half or so that he was in Shanghai and that I was there at the same time. This guy was from Switzerland. This dude was just a mutual friend of my friend from Toronto, so I didn't really know him too well. But the chef, um, since we were like the last patrons in the restaurant, the chef decided to just sit down and have a drink with us, which was awesome. And it's one of the things that I really like about China. That's like anything can happen, right? And typically the rules can definitely be bent, right? I can't imagine that something like this would happen in like in Vancouver, where I'm from, Canada, where the chef would just sit down with a couple of random guys and start having some drinks, and that would be acceptable. But we did it, and it was fun. This picture was taken, I believe, in September of 2015. I had been invited to a really nice hotel, one of the actually, it's one of the big three structures in Pudong, and there was a family that wanted me to teach their daughter English, and I had been teaching them, the two of them, for a couple of months leading up to that, and then I went back to Canada in the summer, and then I returned, and they had money, so they definitely. I guess this is just a trait of Chinese hospitality, but they really went above and beyond, and they didn't have to treat me to, a nice afternoon tea in this hotel. They could have just asked me, "Hey, do you want to teach my daughter or whatever?" Right, and I would have accepted. But uh, I'm really grateful to this family. Although looking back, I've learned a valuable lesson about being greedy with them because. Um, Long story short, what happened is that the mother wanted me to do a two-on-one. So teach, don't get the wrong idea. What I mean is teaching both her daughter and the daughter of her friend at the same time. But she told me that her friend couldn't really afford the rate I was charging. And so I would have to accept a lower rate, but I just declined. I said, no, I won't accept a lower rate. And then unfortunately, that resulted in me losing the client, and that family didn't want to speak to me anymore. So it was really silly of me because at the time, uh, now looking back, I recognize this. When you're getting started in business, you really shouldn't get too picky. You should be all about expanding your network and expanding your skill set and just getting more people to know about you. Because imagine if I had decided to teach those classes, right? Not only would I have made money, whereas by declining I earned zero, but I also probably would have gotten to meet even more uh, mums with children who, who wanted me to teach them. All right, I would have earned more, but I was too short-sighted. Anyways, this was, I think, the tail end of 20, no, something like April, May, maybe even June of 2014. No, definitely, what am I thinking? This is definitely April, right? It was Easter. And this was one of the first occasions where I taught English alongside my mentor, who was right beside me there. And I really didn't know what to expect. I just rolled with the punches, and it really wasn't too bad. It was just, um, looking back, it's juvenile, it's cheesy, but this is what the job is, right? You're there to entertain the children as well as educate them, right? So I just followed along, and I will say that it was easy. It was easy money, and at the time, being a student, I just said yes. I took the opportunity, and I'm glad I did because it led to a lot of other good stuff down the line. This was probably my first independently taught class. Um, it was kind of brutal because I lived maybe an hour or 45 minutes away by subway. And remember how I was telling you earlier about Pudong and how once you go past those those really tall buildings, it's kind of a swamp still. Well, that's what this place was. This place was definitely not the nicest building, and these kids were kind of tough to manage, especially because I hadn't learned how to discipline my class yet and how to keep things under control. But it was an experience, right? So I learned, I got paid, and that's all that really mattered to me. Although looking back, the pay was garbage. I think I got $30, and if you factor in the time it took me to get there, the time it took to conduct the class, and the time to get back home, it would be about 3 hours. So it really wasn't worth it. This was on the set of another film or TV show or whatever, and it's crazy, but they actually have like a facade of an old Shanghai uh, built over there. And so whenever they want to shoot movies or television shows that take place kind of in the past, this is typically where they go. This was a night out, partying. And this was actually one of the more memorable nights. I remember I had gone to the bar right across the street from our school with my Mexican friend there and another guy who isn't in the picture. And it was kind of empty that night, but I noticed these two Mongolian girls sitting and just chit-chatting. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just invite them to hang out. And so we started drinking together and we decided to go out. And as you can see, this one took a fancy to me, and you can't really see her features clearly, but she was good looking. Um, we were all pretty smashed, but uh, I won't go into details. But I'm sure you can imagine what took place after. This was uh, this was definitely 2015. My mentor kind of upgraded. The classroom was way nicer, and it was in I guess what you would call a country club. It was kind of like an exclusive building meant for anyone living in this gated community of rich people. And so I was getting a lot more experience here. I was getting paid more for sure. I think I was making about 40 to $50 an no, I'm thinking Canadian dollars. Let's say 40 US dollars an hour, and I would do maybe 3 classes. So I'd get $120. But then, of course, this place was kind of far away. So this would be about a 6 hour workday, and I get, $120 for it. But still, I was just happy. I just wanted to make a little bit of money. I didn't really care. I barely spent any of it. Um, this was my first semester in my second year. And again, you can see the diversity, although something to note that's interesting is that as you move up into the more advanced classes here, there are definitely more Asian students and less European students. I'll just put it that way. Because the Asian students just find it so much easier to learn Chinese. Korean and Japanese are based off of Chinese. But don't tell them that because a lot of them tend to kind of get angry and feel that their pride is wounded when you mention that. But it is true. This is why they find it so much easier. But anyways, it was a good time. It was kind of I remember being a little upset at the beginning of that year because I felt like my Chinese skills were better and I wanted to be in a higher class, but I had to take a test, right? Everyone takes a placement test at the beginning of the semester, and I felt like I was placed in a class that was beneath me, but whatever, right? I learned, truthfully, I learned much more Chinese just by interacting with Chinese people outside of class and living my life than I did in class. Although at the very beginning, it was good for just getting things going. You know, guys, this video is taking quite a while to make, so I'm just gonna call this part 1, and I will see you again in part 2, okay?